What's up, Bars Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Dropping Bars. I am your host, Kimron Korean, and I have with me today a dear friend of mine to drop some bars with you. I have on the podcast the introvert himself turned extrovert on Dropping Bars, Dr. Wendell Cornwall. Wendell, welcome to the show.
What an introduction, man. Thanks for having me. Dear friend indeed, It's been how many years that we've known each other since 2006.
Yeah, it's been a minute. It's been a minute since we left Grenada to go Mexico. Those days.
Been a minute. It's really good being here on the show, man. I've been looking at it, and I'm glad that you invited me on, and we get to chop it up a bit, huh?
Absolutely. So let's jump right in. So why don't you tell the Bars Nation, who is Dr. Wendell Cornwall, and what do you do? Like, tell us about you.
Sure. Like you said, I'm an introvert, really, usually. I don't usually appear on podcast or put myself right in front of things, but I'm having to do so more often now. I just recently completed my Ph.D. in international trade policy and food security. I focused on small and developing states. Before that, I actually worked as a diplomat with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Grenada. I spent some time in Cuba as well. I was posted there under two former ambassadors, Ambassador Clarence Charles and Ambassador Raphael Joseph. I got some good mentorship from both of them during that time. And then prior to that, we studied together. I studied with you in Mexico. I did international relations. You were an economist. We had a lot of fun times there, And if we go basic about who am I to my roots, I was born and raised in Pedmota, St. George's. At least until 15, I lived in Pedmota, St. George's. St. David's. Oh my God, Pedmota, St. David's. And then I moved to Marion, St. George's, and spent like the latter part of my time there before going on to study in Mexico. So I would say, I'm a humble son of the soil that hasn't really been home for many, many years. So I miss it a lot. I miss Grenada so much. I miss the food. I miss the oil down. So yeah, that's who I am basically.
Absolutely, man. I know I miss the oil long too. Well, you know what? I shouldn't say I miss it, because the truth is, where I am, I get oil long all the time. So I shouldn't say I miss it, but there's just something about being home, being in Grenada, and having a bit of oil down, whether it's with the boys on the block or whatever it is. There's just something different about that. So Wendell, you just said that you completed your PhD in international trade policy and food security with a focus on small island developing states. So that's very impressive. I'm very proud of you. So congratulations. That's a major milestone, man. Like I remember our days in Mexico, just running up and down in the university, and getting our first degree done, and you went all the way, have your PhD now, and I'm super proud of you, man. So tell me about that. Talk to me about what the journey was like to take you to that place of getting to that PhD. What was the journey like for you?
Yeah. Before I start on the journey, I want to say that I remember also a time in Mexico, and it wasn't always running around. I remember spending lots of hours in the library after everyone else has left. Right? We used to stay until the library shut down till very late, and I think because at the beginning, we were all very anxious as well, having just learned the language. We also wanted to maintain our scholarships and perform well. And the other thing I remember is on our graduation day, each and every one of us were called up for some type of award. Right?
Yes,
and I could see how amazed, all the families and so on of the other students who were seeing all these young Black faces going up, and actually excelling in a Spanish-speaking country of all things, right?
And we were the only Black students graduating that day.
We were the only Black students, and the majority of us were from Grenada. We also had from Dominica. We had from St. Vincent, and those were the three, I think. Yeah. So it was a good experience, and that was sort of like the midpoint of our journey, right?
Yep.
Together. And I mean, going all back to the root of it, honestly, I wouldn't have expected to have done a PhD today, right? Or completed a PhD because, like most Grenadians, I experienced we grew up in poverty. When I wasn't a very focused student in secondary school, and when I finished secondary school, I really wanted to just go out and work and make money, to get the things that I saw that I lacked, that I didn't have, And the persons that made an impact on me, my parents really made an impact. My dad, my mom, my stepmom. I remember having fights with them. They pushed me to go to college, and it's actually going to college that I had that sort of a shift in perspective. That hey, I'm actually, when I put my minds to things, I can do well. I actually had a history teacher. Our history teacher was Mrs. Baptiste. She's in Barbados now. And I remember one day, one thing about me, I've always been an avid reader. So I've always liked reading. So I'd read the history texts and so on. And one day she was asking a question based on World War One, a question around World War One. We were looking at World War One, European history. And no one else answered. And I was very timid to answer, but I answered. And I remember she gave me such a big, appreciative hug, like almost like a mother holding on to, and like just that act of appreciation, that act of like, yes, recognition that you said something of value, you contributed something, and I recognize that, I recognize the effort that you put in, really gave me a push. It kind of changed my mindset as well. So after that, I went on to teaching. I started at SGU. There was a program between SGU and CC where you could do courses through SGU to go on to do, I think it was business management or something, to get an MBA. So I started, I was doing well. And then I got a scholarship to Mexico, and that.
Sorry,
yep.
I'll jump in. So, okay. So you said you started teaching, and then you said it was a program between SGU, which is St. George's University, the lone university in Grenada. So I'm trying to understand. So were you teaching at? Was it a case where you were teaching at St. George's University?
No. Yes.
Sorry. What was the?
Yeah, I was teaching at Grenada Boys Secondary School.
Right. Okay. So you're teaching that. Right.
So, yeah, should be more. I was teaching math and history, and also I did a bit of English language at the Grenada Boys Secondary School, mainly at the lower secondary school level. But I already had the bug. I got the bug that I need to go on to study.
Oh, right. Got you.
I didn't have a scholarship, so at the time, and so I started doing these courses. I would do, I think, 3 courses every semester, or something like 2 or 3 every semester.
And that was at SGU now?
At SGU, just part-time, So my intention was to get an MBA and, further my education.
Right.
Yeah. And then luckily enough, we got the scholarship in 2006 to Mexico. We didn't know what to expect. We went there. It was a shock. I'm sure you can recall how shocking it was.
Oh, man.
It's like moving from one culture that is almost completely different. I felt how protected or, sort of not exposed to the world, right? So moving from not being exposed to the world and being sort of in a confined sort of space with family and the Grenadian culture into this like a densely populated city with like people moving, and I mean the culture shock was, I remember being very shocked by the public displays of affection, the PDA, by young and old, which you don't really see in Grenada. And, and then also having to learn the language and so on. But it was very easy to adjust to the food, right? And so went to Mexico, studied. We studied as a group together at the university. We supported each other. We would meet every weekend. I think you remember, almost every weekend on a Saturday we would meet. We would play games, cook Grenadian food. We would try to make oilong with oil breadfruit.
Yeah, we had to maintain the culture, man.
We had to do that we could, we'd meet with other Caribbean students as well. We'd have Caribbean parties. So we had a circle of support there within that environment, which I think was really important for keeping us grounded, keeping us focused, and not really becoming lost, because it can happen with students, especially when you're out on your own. And not just students, but people navigating new environments. And yeah, so after we did that, like I said, I went back, worked with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for a period of time. When I came back from Cuba and I was in Grenada, I actually felt like, there was more that I could do.
Right.
I felt like maybe my skill sets and my experiences weren't being fully utilized. Mm-hmm. And so I searched out a scholarship. I found this scholarship to Australia called the Endeavour Postgraduate Award. It was a merit-based scholarship. It wasn't a development scholarship, which honestly, I was looking for a scholarship that was different from Mexico in the sense that I wouldn't be bonded, right? So it wasn't a development scholarship.
Right. Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
So I got that scholarship. I think I was the only Grenadian to get it. I'm not sure if I was the only one to apply. There were a few other students from the Caribbean region, I think. And yeah, I went to Monash University in Australia. I did a Master's of Diplomacy and Trade.
Okay.
And I did very well, actually. So I'm actually, Kimron, I'm starting to give myself praise because this is something I haven't been doing, right? I haven't been recognizing myself.
You know what? There is something that there is a saying that I completely disagree with, which has something to do with being humble and so. But I think that sometimes when you accomplish something great, you have to give yourself a tap on the back and say, "Hey, I did that." Nobody should feel get on edge or feel a way about somebody's accomplishment. Like somebody's accomplishment shouldn't make you feel less of a person, and we should be able to recognize when someone has done something great. So you know what? Yeah. Go ahead and give yourself the praise, because the truth is you deserve it. Listen, you deserve it. I've seen how diligently you work from Mexico. Yeah, we all did, but I've seen the progression. That group of us that I've watched each and every single one of your progression, and I'm super proud of every one of you. Everyone is doing really, really well in the field. So you know what, man, just go ahead and do that. Like you deserve it. You deserve it, man. Like I'm proud of you.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. Like we don't tap ourselves on the back enough. A lot of us that come from like developing countries, we come from our situations of poverty and so on. We don't tap ourselves on the back enough, because maybe it's a trauma, a psychological thing, a stigma that maybe we don't really deserve, that sort of recognition. But I've been actively recognizing the things that we've accomplished, not just myself, but our group as well. And yeah, when I finished the Masters, I graduated on the Dean's List. And extremely well. So because I did well and I wrote well, the coordinator of the master program actually encouraged me to do the Ph.D. And honestly, my thing was, am I ready to do a PhD now? My thing is, okay, I've just finished a master's. I should go work, get some experience, learn some more, develop my knowledge and so on, and then go back. But she saw that I could do it, right? And so I applied for the PhD. I got another scholarship. I got a full scholarship to do the PhD, which again I didn't expect to get. So I was really happy that I got that. I did the PhD. I went back to Australia. Went back to the same university. And I did a PhD. I studied 2 trade agreements. One is called PACER Plus for short. It's a Pacific. It's an agreement between Australia, New Zealand, and Pacific Island countries. And then the Economic Partnership Agreement between the Caribbean states and the EU. And I looked at how I was looking at the impact on food security, but from a human rights perspective. So I looked at the right to food. And let me tell you, Nello, imposter syndrome is real. Imposter syndrome is real. You sounded very enthusiastic, and I've spoken to many other PhD students, and I realized that it's not just myself, but it's something I shared. Because it could be a very battling with big ideas and theories, and then you have the pressure of you want to contribute something to theory, and you doubt yourself.
Right.
Many times you doubt yourself, So I had to battle through that with the support of friends and our network and my supervisors and so on. I think actually we do have a group on WhatsApp, and I think actually once I posted in there that we need to really open up to each other and share more, right?
Yes.
We have to, because we always share big ideas or things in football or basketball and so on. I remember I was saying we need to, because we are a support system for each other, and we're all experiencing different things, so we have to be there. Have to be able to open up about these things. So that's really my progression. I've finished the PhD. I've moved to Singapore. I'm not sure if it's going to be a temporary or permanent stay as yet. And I'm now doing many things to keep myself occupied. So I'm continuing to do courses online on trade. I've done this workshop on sport facilitating meetings and so on. So I'm actually going out. There's a company here called Facilitators Network Singapore. I go out with them. I'm just learning. I've registered a consulting business that here in Singapore. I've registered a consulting business that will be doing trade research, doing capacity building and training, and also trade advisory and policy and building, that sort of thing. But it's just started, trying to build it from the ground up, and trying to, take the next step.
Yes, man.
The next step forward.
Absolutely. So, talk to me about your thesis. I know you said you studied two different trade policies. And so what was I mean, give me the summary version of your thesis and your findings.
One thing I've realized, Nello, when you speak with anyone that's in academia and done research, and you ask them to tell you, it's a lot. It could be both oh, and or it could be just opens up a lot, right? So like you said, I'll try to give you a summarized version. So my thesis, what I really looked at was how the negotiation process and how market access trade rules, which are basically agriculture market access trade rules, which are the rules for opening up or removing barriers to trade to enable the flow of trade between countries. And also sanitary and phytosanitary measures. There's also rules on that. So that has to do with the safety and health of the agri-foods that we import and export. They have to meet certain standards, right? Health standards, safety standards, free of pests and so on. So I wanted to understand the effect of this process, these rules, this negotiation process, these rules on the choices that governments make in terms of their trade policy choices, right? But looking at it from the perspective of how these rules and how these governments interact with the society, their societies as a whole, right? So not just developing trade policy in a vacuum, with trade negotiation, just trade negotiators and so on, but taking into account the social norms, the social relations, and the social institutions, right? So how these social norms and these preferences may or may not be integrated or used or guiding our trade policies because of these trade rules or these trade agreements. And so I actually I interviewed 24 different persons, about half in the Pacific island countries. I traveled to Vanuatu and Samoa and Tonga. Actually, in 2015, it's actually a continuation of a thesis I did in 2015 on just the Pay Surplus Agreement, the Pacific one, where I had traveled to Fiji and I had done interviews there as well. We did a study for an NGO there called the Pacific Network on Globalization. And so it was a continuation on that. And what I found, Nello, so I did 24 interviews and I looked at about 160 documents, trade policy documents, agriculture policy documents, food security policy documents, WTO documents. And what I found, one of the findings that really stood out for me is that when it comes to the norms that come from rural societies in the Caribbean and the Pacific, if you look at our agricultural sector policies and so on, you look at some of them, you can see almost like it's put on a lower level, right? So there's this push towards we have to commercialize agriculture, right? So we have to move our rural farmers into semi-commercial and commercial enterprises, or they have to move towards that sort of economy. Whereas, especially in the Pacific Islands, I found smallholder farmers are mainly focused on what is called livelihood farming, right, or subsistence farming. So they produce food not just it's to make a profit, but it's not just commercialized incentive, right? It's they produce the stuff for food. In Vanuatu, for example, they produce this thing called kava, which they use in like ceremonial stuff. Like they get together and they will drink. It's a part of their culture, their social structures. It's much more than just economic incentives, right?
Okay.
But you find that these sort of norms and values are, one, they're placed at a lower level because of push. Right, and a lot of these documents, they're funded by international organizations like the World Bank. These policy documents, they push towards commercializing, and which by itself isn't. There's nothing wrong with that, right? By itself, but it also shows that we do not appreciate how vibrant just rural economies are, just as they are, right? Just as they're focused on what they're focused on, which is subsistence, livelihoods, community, kinship, those sorts of things is really important. So, for example, growing up in Grenada, we talked about oil. When we cook up oil on the block, right? Someone maybe will bring a breadfruit, a couple of breadfruit.
Yeah.
We put together, we buy flour. You know what I'm saying? Like we come together as a community, we cook up the pot and so on. That's a part of the economy there. That's a part of the livelihood and that's a part of the community building aspect of it. And so the thing with the negotiation process, the agenda setting process and so on with for both the Pay Surplus and the EPA is that you don't see mention of those aspects, right? It's not given that level of importance. What the focus is on is on opening up trade and reducing trade barriers, right?
Right.
But from my argument is, from my point of view, when you develop your trade policy, when a government develops its trade policy, we have things like stakeholder engagement. And in fact, I've attended stakeholder engagements here in the Pacific at Fiji, where they meet and they explain what the agreements are about and so on. But it's just an explanation. This is what the agreement does. Very technical sort of stuff. I sat with NGO members. They don't really understand the technicalities of it. I mean, we were there. We tried to explain to them. They don't really understand the very technical things that goes into complex trade agreements. And then the conversation, at least the ones that I sat in on, is one direction, right? So the discourse, the language and everything is being set, I would say, by the big players. It shows it's being set by the big players, by the developed countries. And the voices, the preferences, the norms that should really be going into influencing or informing our trade policy, right, is not getting in there, and it's important that these things inform our trade policy, that it's informed by these voices, by our society, because trade, and you're an economist, right? So the theory, the discourse, the guiding philosophy of, therefore, international trade rules that are being developed. The guiding philosophy is that if you open up your markets, if you engage in free trade, you increase your productivity, right? So economic development, because you specialize and so on, theories of comparative advantage and so on. All right? But what happens is that the social aspects, the social development, the environmental aspects, sustainability, ecology, and so on are treated as externalities, as they say in economics. As we know that there's an effect, but we treat it as we don't account for it in our models,
right?
Or adequately account for it in our models, and so those costs are not being accounted for, right? Whereas if we had the interactions between the development of these international trade rules and the voices on the ground, the societies, the people saying, okay, this is how we actually live, right? Because you have people, I remember one farmer saying that, like, she's worried about these trade rules and opening up, because what is it going to do to their way of doing things? It's going to change their way of doing things, right? I don't want to say that change is bad. Change can be good, but you need to involve the communities, get their voices, and sometimes the best ideas will come from them, right?
Right.
Yeah, I can take one example and I'll stop. I don't remember which bridge. I remember someone told me this story. Let's assume a contractor came to build a bridge in a village, right, over a river, and the river is low, the water is low, or whatever, and someone from the community comes and he tells the contractor, whatever, the expert, that, look, you're building the bridge too low. The bridge too low. When rainy season comes, you're going to see what's going to happen, right? This bridge is too low. They don't take into account that voice. What do you know? Right? I'm the expert here, I'm the engineer, and so on. They go ahead to build the bridge. Rainy season comes around. The water comes over the banks, the bridge gets damaged, whatever, right? And it doesn't work. And in 2000, actually, the small island developing states, there was a couple, most of them from the Caribbean, they actually had a proposal before the WTO, which is the World Trade Organization, right? Regulates multilateral trade, oversees multilateral trade, saying that in the proposal, they say that these trade rules, we've liberalized and deregulated agriculture and so on extensively, because of IMF and World Bank conditions or whatever. We're not seeing the benefits. And when things change and we need to have flexible rules, or we need to have preferences, as they call it, or special and differential treatment, as they call it in these rules, we don't have it, right? That was in 2000, shortly after we negotiated the Economic Partnership Agreement and we negotiated the PESA Plus, right? So there isn't really an alignment there. Even if you look at the documents and you see that they talk about incorporating development and so on, it's not really incorporated. Oh, I try to keep it brief.
Okay, so
I try to keep it brief.
Yeah. No, for sure. So your argument is that when we are implementing or introducing different international trade policies in whatever country, that we need to take into consideration the local culture. The stakeholder engagement needs to be a two-way street where you gather information and local knowledge from the people on the ground, information that you may not have, which would make for a more robust policy, as opposed to you coming in without understanding the culture, the way of life, the norms, what happens on the ground, doing something, and then either one eroding the local culture or the local way of life, or doing something that may not last because you did not factor in things that the local man would have known.
And you summarized it nicely. Nicely
Right.
packaged it, but really focusing on the right to food and so on. So eroding, as you say, eroding that right to food, that food security aspect.
Okay.
Yeah, which is very relevant today because they're saying we're going to be entering a third global food crisis. So
right.
Let's see what happens. Yeah.
Okay, no, fantastic. So, tell me, were there throughout the journey, what is the biggest obstacle that you faced?
So the biggest obstacle, the first obstacle for I think most people coming from developing countries is always finance.
Right.
Financial. Right. So I wanted to study when I was teaching, and I actually wanted to go to law school. I remember I was looking at Vanderbilt Law School and so on. Did SATs and everything, but you can't afford it, right? You can't. I think the tuition was it like 40,000 a year? I don't even know what the tuition is now. That's US.
Right.
And then then I obviously I started doing part time at SU. I don't know how long it would have taken me, right? Now, this is why development scholarships are important. It's very important because I did well in college, but I was not an island scholar by no means, right? There's plenty of wasted time in secondary school, just a lack of focus as well. That's something I really had to work on.
Right.
And so the development scholarships, they're always important. I know there's always criticisms of, I don't know, we have scholarships to Morocco or Syria or Russia. I don't know. Some people criticize and say, well, why you have scholarships to these places and sending students to these places? And there have been horror stories, not just from Grenadians, from others. Experiences are not always positive for everyone, right? But it's an avenue that we need to have for those of us. Everyone needs to have the opportunity. They don't have to take it. They need to have the opportunity to get an advanced education without having to worry about finances, if they so choose, right? Yeah, of course, we have resource constraints in Grenada. We have to go outside. We have to navigate out there, send out our diplomats and so on to negotiate, our policymakers, our ministers, and so on to negotiate on our behalf to in order to access these scholarships. So finance has always been one of my biggest obstacles, and luckily I've been able to overcome that through being serious when it was needed about education, doing well. And so I was able to go from one scholarship to the next. But for even those that are not pursuing a very academic route, you need training, you need mentorship, and so on. We need to have that being provided as well. There needs to be a route for young people to enhance themselves. And there are things being done. I know the GIDC has a program that's on stream right now where they train, I think they train, it's either English, remedial English, but for with business focus and mathematics and so on to young adults. And then these young adults come up with their business or their business plans and they get financing and so on. It's a continuing program. So we need more of those things, right? And not just more of them. We need to know about them as well.
Right, that's true.
They shouldn't just be there in I don't know if it's still DHR, Department of Human Resource and Ministry of Education. It shouldn't just be there and people don't know about it. It needs to be broadcasted for everyone. Okay, so that's one. That was a major one. The second obstacle that I faced was more of a personal and internal obstacle. Right? And I think it's something that we don't talk about enough in Grenada. Right? And I've raised it somewhere else before. We face a lot of psychological strain and trauma. Whether we define it as that or not, right? Young people face, for whatever reasons, may have low self-esteem issues, low confidence issues, imposter syndrome, right? I'm not talking about being schizophrenic or like very severe cases, but even those cases, right? But I'm talking about the daily psychological pressures that we face, right? That's always an obstacle. And like I told you, when I was doing the Ph.D., especially during the lockdown, you could feel it because you're not interacting with much people and so on. You're by yourself, right? I really think that we need to have more. Resources, in place to deal with, and not just to deal with, not to address when it's a problem, when it starts to manifest, but just to resources to help young people understand that mental health is important, understand techniques and so on to deal with different sort of stress factors that they may face and things that are going on in their lives. And why I say that, Anello, when I was a teacher, I remember having a student. I'm not going to say names, but I still like have him in my Instagram or whatever. We don't communicate, but like I watch, like, the students, I have them on Instagram and Facebook so I can see like how they're going. But I remember this one student, he missed school for maybe like a week and a half and so on. And then he came. He always seemed like a bit unfocused in school. And I asked him, like, one thing I would have was regular chats with my students. And I asked him, like, why were you, like, why weren't you in school? And his response was that he didn't have food to eat. Right?
Right.
Now, I understand. Because I lived that as well. Not missing school, but maybe having one meal a day. See my mom, like, asking neighbors or getting her breadfruit here and there and creating a meal out of nothing. She was a magician.
Right, yeah. A lot of our parents are magicians, eh?
A lot of them are, but up to this day, like, I avoid like something like mix up foods because I just associated with like the struggle. But yeah, like, and imagine, like, when I think back on myself during that period of time as well, it's a mental strain. So imagine as a child is going through that, whatever struggles they're facing at home, and then they do not have a support system to address these sort of stress factors in their lives, right? It can completely derail you. If you don't have a support system, and like I said, I have a support system with you guys as friends that we've gone through the struggles together. I've seen the success that you've had as well, and continue to talk. I have a good support system in family, but not everything you can go to family about. Not everything a child is willing to go to family about. So that has been one personal obstacle I've had to overcome. The way I've done it during the pandemic and the lockdowns in Australia, first time ever, I went to a psychologist.
Right.
Yeah, I spoke to a psychologist. I said, look, this is happening. This is how I'm feeling about the thing. I feel like I'm not productive enough. I'm not moving ahead. And just talking and listening and exploring all my history and backgrounds and what could be causing that was very, very helpful. Got me moving. That's one way. The other thing, every morning now, I have a routine. So I'm trying to work towards a routine. I try to get up at 4 or 5. It's not. Today I was able to get up at 4. It's not really set in yet, but I try to get up. Usually I wake my wife up before she's the one that wakes me up. And then I get up. I try to have exercise or something, eat healthy. And you know what I do when I get up in the morning? I put on my Spotify. I go to some motivational podcasts, different types of motivational podcasts, and I listen to that, and I do it like what I said. I pat myself on the back, self-recognition for the things that I've accomplished and so on, because oftentimes we are our own worst enemies. We don't appreciate ourselves enough.
Yeah, you and I have a very similar morning routine. Very similar. Yeah, I wake up around the same time when my wife wakes me up. We go to work out. We work out. and the same thing. Listen to some of the motivational and so uh, audios on like Spotify or wherever, but also doing a little 10-minute meditation just to kind of get your day started right. So we have a very similar. Wake up around similar times. So we have a very similar morning routine, right? And I mean, there are mornings when I really don't want to wake up. Like I just no, but I do it. Discipline is key. So
Freezing weather when it's
exactly. But imagine like waking up at like 4:30, 5, and then hitting the cold winter streets of Toronto to either go to the gym or whatever. Yeah, it's crazy. So yeah. I'm pretty sure along the way, there are some lessons learned. You know what? No, I want to go back a little bit.
Okay.
Before I go there, I kind of want to go back to what you were talking about before, and something that came to mind that I didn't ask, but I wanted to see how maybe throw it up. Now, I wanted to look at looking at what you spoke about as it relates to the work on your thesis and looking at how trade policies can be pretty much improved by I guess fostering engagement with local stakeholders. What is the relationship with economic growth where that is concerned? Is there a direct relationship with the economic growth of an economy? Let's say Grenada, for example, with international organizations before, whether it's introducing a certain policy, engaging with the locals. And I ask the question because I know sometimes, for instance, you say these organizations might come in with a trade policy, and that trade policy is focused on, well, like it's the commercialization, taking a lot of the local stuff and ultimately monetizing a lot of it without factoring the local custom. So does factoring the local custom actually aid in more economic growth of that economy, or doesn't it matter? Is it just a case of, well, just factoring them just because? Or is there a relationship between that and economic growth?
I think there's definitely a relationship. So, when you look at international trade rules, and I have to say this before I go, I have to say this first, that it's not because the trade negotiators from the Caribbean and so on are not pushing an agenda that's more supportive of all local norms and so on. Mm-hmm. In fact, the small island developing state narrative is quite powerful in global governance, right? Especially when it comes with the climate change agenda and so on. Small island developing state, even Grenada has played a leadership role. I think you remember Ambassador Decima Williams. I know. I think you know her. She was.
I know her very well. Yes,
she was very vocal. Yeah, she was. Yeah, I do remember that. Very vocal. I remember. I think Grenada was the chair of I think the Alliance of Small Island Developing Small Island States at the time. I'm not sure, right? But the Caribbean small islands have always been vocal, remain vocal, very, very powerful voices, very strategic as well when it comes to trade policy interest and defending our trade policies and so on. I know, for example, with I don't know if there's still an import ban or something on eggs, but they protect the egg sector in Grenada.
Right.
So there's definitely a link. Now, classically, how we look at trade policies, that you open up free trade, like I said before, and you do all this specialized, you increase your production, right? And that's how that's economic growth is defined. One aspect of it, is increasing production, right? Increase production, so you have economic growth. But welfare is much more than just economic production, right? So, for example, let's say we started a new industry in the Caribbean, and we're very vulnerable to these things, right? And let's say it's egg. Let's say we've signed a free trade agreement. We've developed a egg industry. It's been closed off. We don't have imports, and then we open up, right? Because we believe in that free trade philosophy, that free trade idea. Then what happens when we open up? Are we able to compete on the international market, right? When we bring these free trade rules, when we implement them, are we able to compete on the international market? Often we cannot, right? And not through not wanting, not necessarily through like mismanagement or because this is where we blame. This is where we blame, or we see these documents blaming the farmers and so on.
Right.
They don't want to change their mindset. They don't want to bring in these processes that could value add and commercialize and so on, right? We often see that discourse there. But small states, when you're what's the size of Grenada? 344 square kilometers or something like that, maybe a bit more. 110,000 persons. Our markets are small, our resources are small, right? And then you have to compete, let's say, with the US, where they have huge agricultural subsidies. They've just approved new subsidies under Biden, green subsidies. The EU, right? So they have massive support, huge, huge players in terms of agriculture. They produce an egg, for example, all right? And we open up our markets. How is a small farmer able to compete, right? Now, we've experienced it before. We've experienced it with banana industries, right? We've experienced that. We've experienced the impact that it has had on that industry. So definitely it affects. So what I'm saying is that when you're designing trade policy, you have to be very strategic about it, and you have to know what your defensive and offensive interests are. This is what trade negotiators would say, right? You have to be very strategic. We don't just want to open up just for the philosophy of opening, because it can definitely have a negative impact on our economies. We depended on cocoa and sugar and banana production and exports to the EU, and through changes in the normative changes or the rule changes at the multilateral level, we felt that impact, right? And we may say we're not powerful enough actors to negotiate. I don't believe that. I think we can find ways to navigate, and get our interests out there, but that's even a whole other conversation about how small states can get power and negotiate and so on. But yes, definitely it's linked to welfare. So in welfare, we talk about the economic growth aspect. That's important, right? Oftentimes, the promised economic growth that we expect hasn't happened, right? And this is what the small island states, the small island developing states themselves said to the WTO in 2001. We've done all of this. Opening up and so on. Where's the benefits, right? The social and environmental impacts that's not taken, right? That's also a part of welfare, right? How is it going to affect our communities or norms, social development, poverty eradication, right? What will be the effect on poverty? On poverty eradication, right? And environmental sustainability. So you have to look at it. Like this, not just this one dimension, which is I would say, right, is if you look at how the rules are designed, it's the primary focus. The agreements, EPA, for example, it does have a food security provision. They do have the EPA, not the pay surplus. It does have a food security provision. So if food security, I think it's based on price. If prices drop to a certain level, then they can have some. I think I'm not sure if it's export bans or anyway, but there's a provision in there. I'm not exactly sure how the mechanism works, but it has a food security provision. It might be if there's input surges and prices drop, something like that. I'll have to look at it again. So sometimes it can have protections, but whether it's enough, with the COVID-19 and what's happening with the disruptions of supply chains, our policymakers in the Caribbean are saying it's not enough. They're saying we have a food
Right.
security issue. So other countries are actually putting in place. The World Bank released a report saying about 21 countries put in place, I think, export bans and other measures to insulate from the disruptions and to ensure that food prices because food prices have been increasing. So to
Yes.
reduce food prices, right? And our policymakers in the Caribbean, I think the Prime Minister of St. Vincent, maybe in 2021, was talking about the food insecurity issue, right? That has been happening because of COVID-19, this disruptions in supply chains and so on. So we're very vulnerable when we open up, and we don't have the
Right.
measures in place to, when we sign on to agreements, if we implement them, we don't have the measures in place, the trade tools in place to insulate ourselves from those types of disruptions. Yeah.
Okay, got you. No, that was quite clear. That was quite clear. Completely understand. I feel like I just got a master class in international trade policy. All right, awesome. So tell me, what are any lessons you learned along the way, like that you can share with the Bars Nation?
Okay, yeah. So I think I'll probably be repeating some things I said earlier. So, just from my experience, one of the things that I learned is that you don't have to be your biggest critic. You have to be your biggest fan.
Right.
You can't always be criticizing yourself and coming down on yourself. And oftentimes this comes from looking at other people's past and their progress and their success, and sort of being like, oh, I'm 38. This person is 28 or just 20 or whatever, and look at what they have and what I don't have. Or look at these are the persons I school with, and look at where they are, but I'm not there. No, we can't be our biggest critic. We have to focus on the journey that we talked about. You asked me about the journey. Focus on our progress, right? You have to focus on other people's goals or their successes. Now, you have to define your goal. You have to define your goal. Define where you want to be. So my second thing would be that define the person you want to be, whether it's a month's time, 3 years time, 5 years time, 10 years time, whatever. Define the person you want to be. Now, this is a lesson I learned from a good friend of mine, Johanna Lafayette. Yeah, you know Johanna. I always pronounce her
I know her
correctly. But we schooled together and everything. So we actually went through. She went through like a technique with me. Where I looked at my goals in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years in the future. Right? Define your goals, but it doesn't end there. You define your goals, and she asked me to share this. I'm sharing it. You define your goals, and you start today. Like you look at your goals 10 years down the line, and you start today. Like if there's no big major obstacle preventing you. So one of my goals was just I want to have a consulting business think tank, fully recognized at the top of its game. Recognized as a thought leader. Providing support and capacity building and training throughout the region, right? So that when our people go out there, they're well trained and they're fully knowledgeable about what they're going to face and how to present our interests and objectives and achieve what we need to achieve for social, economic development and so on. And she said, "Why not just register now?
Right.
Why not just do it today?" And she's not the only one that told me that, but she was the first one that told me that then, right? And that's what got me started registering my business. And it's registered, so I have to work at it, right? It's registered here, I have to work at it. So define your goals, but you don't have to, like, if you have a mindset that, oh, that's my big goal, I have to do this before I get it. I have to study. Or I need to go study international trade or economics or whatever before I can do it or before I can start or make any steps towards it. Then flip that on its head. See, what can I do today to start it? And if there are things that's in the way, obstacles and things are in the way, we do pestle analysis in business, when you start in business, you do your pestle analysis. Okay, what's the regulations? What's the technical know-how? So on and so forth. And you start. You start with a business plan, but the mindset shouldn't be to do a business plan and put it on the shelf. All right? You start. So define yourself, define your success, define your goals. And the last thing, have a routine.
Yes.
Have a routine. That's been just have a routine. I feel like it's been working for me. I'm usually not a very structured person when it comes to like, I'll sit down and I'll be like, oh, I have all this to do. Okay, let me just do, but you have a routine of key things that you're going to do every day. Right. So, you don't have to get up at 4:00. You don't have to. You don't have to get up at 5. You start your day whenever it's comfortable for you to start. But the key things, like you said, exercise, find time to exercise. If you can, find time to exercise. Make the time to exercise, right? If you decide you're going to do, it doesn't have to be extreme exercise. It could be walking, it could be jogging, it could be a few push-ups, it could be whatever, because being fit is also tied to your mental health, right?
Correct.
Find time for, as you say, meditation. It could either be meditation, it could be silent reflection, it could just be deep rest, but not sleeping. You just find some time for yourself where you can just release. So you're not wound up the whole day, right? Whether you started in the morning, you do it midday, at the end. My supervisor for my PhD thesis, every time at 2:30, I think it's 2:30. If I'm speaking to her, I have to go do my half an hour meditation now on the dot. You know what I mean? So I know, like, always expected. You have a meeting, okay, she's gonna go do her meditation at this time, right? And I think that's very vitally important for just giving yourself that mental stability and focus and so on, getting out of your headspace. There's actually a technique I use for. Maybe I'll share. I don't remember what it's called. Maybe it's called anchoring, actually. It's a technique I use for regaining focus, and you can spend like 11 minutes to half an hour doing it. Where it's this deep rest. Basically, like you're working, and sometimes your head gets filled up with all the work, and you start to get stressed out and so on.
Right.
It's a way of clearing your mind, so it takes you out of your headspace. And it reinserts you into your environment. You have to use your senses to smell and listen and look around at what's going on. And you do it repeatedly. You can look it up, anchoring. You do it repeatedly, and after a while, like if you're having a headache or if you're in tension or stress, or whatever, I'm telling you, it fades away because you're giving your head the rest that it needs. So that deep rest in the routine is very important.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing that. I will definitely check out anchoring, check out that strategy. So, Wendell, as we come to a close on the podcast, I want to ask you a very off the cuff question. Now,
Sure.
if you had $100 to spend in one day, you had one day to spend $100, what will you buy?
A full day to spend $100.
Yes.
I'll probably buy books. I'll probably buy books and food. Honestly, so, like, is it and it doesn't have to be and it wouldn't be like some dense book. It'll be some novel or something, and nice just to relax, have something to read that's different from what I normally read. I think so. I don't know what would you buy with $100 in a day? I'm interested in knowing.
What would I buy? I think I will get myself 2 ebooks from on my Kindle.
Okay.
That specifically focus on something to do with either digital marketing or entrepreneurship.
Yeah. quite different for me. Because I would just get the novels.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, the thing we're both getting books, but I'm gonna get something. And the reason for that, especially right now, is because I saw this study, and it's so interesting that you mentioned books, because I saw this study that said that if you read a book a month, and that's actually one of my goals for 2023. Yeah. I plan to. Well, I'm reading a book a month now, so I'm almost finished with January book. And then I have an idea for what's February's book already, and then and so on and so forth. And it said something along the line of you're going to be like in the top 1% in your space or something like that if you read. But it's something to that. But ultimately, if you read a book a month, because a lot of people do, not a lot of people read the way that they're supposed to, the way that they need to or they're supposed to. It puts you ahead of the game ultimately. So that's my goal for 2023, and I will be reading one book a month. So by the end of the year, I should have read at least 12 books.
Yeah. That's a good. That's a good goal, man. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's the. Yeah, I started with alchemy. So.
What
yeah,
is that?
so,
that's that's
the name of the book. Sorry, the name of the book is called Alchemy.
I was about to look for rocks and
No, the book is called Alchemy. So it's quite interesting. Okay, great. So Wendell, you know what? Let me put some respect on your name, Dr. Wendell Cornwall.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming on Dropping Bars. Thank you for sharing your story with the Bars Nation. I mean, I felt like we got a masterclass in trade policy today, and I really appreciate you. I mean, keep doing what you're doing, keep doing a great job, and yeah, man, I wish you nothing but success. I know that whatever you do next, I know you started the business, you're registered the business, and you'll be going deeper and deeper into that. So I mean, I look forward to seeing what comes of that, and to really just I'll be cheering you on the sidelines, just looking on and saying, yeah, man, go, man, I know you can do it. Just being there and providing whatever support I can. So again, congratulations to you on completing your PhD, and thank you again for coming on the podcast and sharing with me today. I really appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I know it's early in the morning where you are. It's 10:20 p.m. Where I am, so time to get some sleep. Well, at the time of recording this, obviously it's not going to be released at that time. So to everyone who is tuned in to Dropping Bars, wherever you're consuming this podcast, whether it's on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, whether you're watching it on YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in to another week of Dropping Bars, and I will see you guys next week for another episode when I will have another special guest with me. Again, Wendell, thank you for coming on the podcast today, and Bars Nation, I will talk to you next week. Have a good one.
Yo, a brightest tower representing Dropping Bars with Kimran Korean. It's all about life lesson in a youth. Bob Marley do it with him mouth, Zidane do it with him foot. Never doubt yourself. Never lose the focus. Just some more positive content, Fully provision. Good meditation. Dropping bars and I build the motivation. Yo, Kimran Korean. Every ghetto youth, them a pre-elevation. Stop carry feelings, focus on the arts and craft. Get rid of all malice and dirty art, youth. Work hard, believe in your dreams. These are the motivation tips, dog. Success strategies. Energy follow energies. Negative follow negativity. There is a free will to creativity. It's a journey within. Cause we dropping bars. Dropping bars. Dropping bars. We keep going hard. Going hard. Going hard. We keep dropping bars. Dropping bars. Dropping bars. Dropping bars. Dropping bars. We keep going hard. Going hard. Going hard. dropping bars, dropping bars.